Hi everyone, welcome to the weekly program. Today is episode 33. At the moment we're just waiting a couple more minutes so more people can join in. And today we're gonna talk with Leyton from Lusitanian Ghosts. I'm still waiting for Neil to join in as well. Alright, we have Lusitanian Ghosts here. Gonna join them now. Oh, I don't know what I've done. Alright, cool, I just cut it the music. Alright, now we're waiting for Neil to join the conversation. Let's try again. Opa. Let's try again. All right.
Whoa!
Now it's working. See?
I feel like I just fast forwarded in space travel to like 2020. I'm from the past.
But we figured out a way to do this anyways, and yeah, it's really good to have you here. And thank you, first of all, thank you so much for being
No,
here, having
thank
the
you.
time and energy.
No, thank you for having the energy and the time and for doing all these amazing things that you do.
Thank you so much, and you're welcome. This is really good because it's it's mutual gratitude. So this conversation starts well. um, First of all, what we start, the way we start this program, we start by our guests doing a little intro bio about themselves. So you say your name and what you do, and then from there we start picking the topics of the conversation.
All right, let's do this. I have many names, but when I started making music in Canada, when I became a Canadian citizen, my citizenship card said Neil Leyton, but of course nobody could really pronounce Leyton properly, so I changed that to Leyton. So Neil Leyton it was the easiest Anglo pronunciation of my Portuguese name. And yeah, what was the question?
No, so just a little intro. So you're Neil, and you play in Lusitanian Ghosts, right? But
Oh
not
yeah, yeah.
only that, you have another different names, and you do different things, and you help a lot of different people throughout the music industry, and not only
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
basically
I mean, when I was born in Portugal back in the 70s, my name is Nuno Afonso Ribeiro Saraiva Canejo Leitão. So I have many names. It's most Portuguese people have many names.
yeah.
It's I don't know what that makes us, but it's sort of sometimes very confusing. But anyway, I started making music. My mom remarried and we went to Canada when I was 12. So I learned English between the age of 12 and 14, I
All
guess.
right.
Although it probably took, it takes a whole life to really master a language. So I guess I'm still learning. And then when I came back to Portugal, I had to sort of relearn Portuguese also, because I had an English accent when I moved back here in 2008. Yeah, so I started making music, listening to my mother's record collection. She had a lot of Beatles records and Elvis records. I liked Elvis, but I wasn't all that crazy about the Beatles. So I went out and found the Stones and Bowie. And my mom was like, "Oh, don't listen to the Stones. They're drug addicts." And uh, But you know, so I kind of got into rock and roll that way, and I started playing bass in a band called Passion Flower in high school.
What year was that?
Oh man, I guess that would have been late '80s, early '90s. I couldn't really tell you for sure, but maybe Daniel Dutnoff, who I think is around, he might know better than that. You might remember better than me. Um, it's fun because last year when I went to Canada for CMW, Passion Flower got back together and we recorded 4 songs that were, you know, releasing slowly but surely. Yeah.
We have some bass supporters here. Boom.
I
You
love the
started
bass, you know, I love playing bass. I love the, like, you know, I love records where the bass is really up front in the mix, from like, you know, James Jamerson in Motown Records to Duff McKagan or in Guns N' Roses, or Sammy Yaffa from Hanoi Rocks, you know. Um, to me, the bass is like you should really be able to tell the notes in the bass, or like, you know, Guns of Brixton by the Clash. You know,
Yes.
I love that bass.
Oh yeah. And how was that experience to start like a music career like in Canada, early 90s, like late 80s, early 90s, like how was that like? Because people from like nowadays, or myself, I was born in 92. I have no idea how that was, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't really call it a career per se. You know, we started making music, and there was this studio called Studio 92 that had a really friendly engineer called Norm Barker, and we used to like save up our cash to go and record songs at this studio on tape, because you didn't have computers and home recording. I mean, you had like the Fostex X26 4-track recorder on cassette tape, but you didn't have you know, just Pro Tools or whatever to take around with your computer, or GarageBand or any of that stuff. So you needed studios, and so we started going to Studio 92, which was built in an old movie theater, a converted movie theater called the Donlands in Toronto, and that's where we sort of started learning about how you went about recording and making music. So I think the first time I went there was with Passion Flower. As I said, I was playing bass, but then I very quickly got the idea to start singing and sort of recording my own stuff. And and I just re-released last week some of those old recordings from Studio 92, the first solo recordings I made. And then things kind of got a little different because I finished university and formed another band called the Conscience Pilot, and the Conscience Pilot sort of grew to be a thing in Toronto 95, 96. So the mid
All right.
90s there was a lot of attention on the Conscience Pilot. So at that point, I started having to learn a bit more about the music industry and
Yeah.
how to navigate the waters of the music industry, because we
That
were.
that was one of the questions I was gonna ask you. How did that happen? Like how that link became like a reality for you, and was that a necessity? Was that like something you had to learn, or it just happened? I don't know. Like just
You know, I, you know, we've talked about this before, but it's the stuff that I sort of told you when we first met at Westway Lab. It's like it was a necessity to learn how to navigate the waters of the music business, and it's really one of my strongest drives to help out other younger generations as much as I can, to make sure that you don't make the mistakes I made.
yeah,
Oh, you know, and because
I feel you.
I was really learning by headbutting the walls. You know, it was we had, you know, with Conscience Pilot there was a lot of media attention because we were like this sort of art glam band at the height of grunge. So, you know, we were walking around the streets looking like the New York Dolls or something, and people were like, wearing flannel and shorts and listening to Pearl Jam or whatever, and we were like the antithesis of this. So there was like, whoa, what the hell are they about? So there was a lot of
That's
attention.
punk as fuck. That's like
There was a lot of attention, and so we had deal offers on the table from independent labels, but also from Sony ATV, from the publishing department of Sony, which was our, so we had these offers on the table, and we had to figure out, okay, well, do we go, with Sony ATV for publishing, for a development deal, or do we go and sign with this independent label, Constant Change, that was around at the time, and it was really tough deciding all of that stuff, and so meanwhile I started my own label and publisher called
but
Fading Ways.
sorry, but this was 96, so before like the boom of the internet and streaming and downloading, so
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
people would still like make records and sell
Yeah.
records, like
So we had
like good numbers.
we had the number one independent record in Toronto at Sam the Record Man in '96 when the first Conscience Pilot record came out, and that's what a lot of the attention got us to that point. And then ultimately we decided to go with Constant Change, the independent label, and we decided to sort of keep our publishing, for better or for worse. And basically, when we come to '97, the band broke up because Constant Change would not release the second record, and they have the first right of refusal, which is an interesting clause. And if you ever read it, run. If you ever see that on a contract, run away. But basically, so I built Fading Ways as a label up on the notion of being an artist-friendly place to release records on vinyl and on CD at the time,
Yeah. Oh man, that's and like after that band, did you continue doing other bands and like developing like while you're like getting like in the depths of like music industry and music business, did you carry playing music as well, right? How was that like
Yeah.
how was that how did you manage to do that? How did you find it hard because it's like two like it's pretty two like unbalanced worlds like together, so did you manage that? And obviously you started this in a young kind of like age, so
Yeah,
how was that?
I would have been around 23, I think, when Conscience Pilot was going, and so but I realized that the necessity of helping out my friends and putting out other bands' records on Fading Ways and stuff, like local Toronto bands like Sharp Kid and Plasma Blast and stuff, even the Sinisters, who were this awesome glam punk band that was absolutely, probably still to this day, one of the best bands I've ever seen live. And to have them on Fading Ways was a real honor. Also the Pariahs. So I genuinely really enjoyed the business side also. So it's always been a bit tough straddling both worlds, until I came back to Portugal in 2008, and that's when I realized, hold your horses. Now I got to focus on the business, because Portugal really, really needs an independent trade association and a lot of guidance for independent artists on what ISRC codes are and all the boring business stuff. But it's really super important boring business stuff in 2020.
Yeah.
So digital
No,
is here.
that was definitely one of the things I was gonna talk about in this conversation, because I do think is relevant, the work you do, not only for Portugal but for everybody you work with, because I do think that your presence and your being affects way more people than just Portugal. But you focus that energy in Portugal, but the change you do, I think, is way deeper and wider than just in Portugal itself. But that's just an opinion. But yeah, like
Thank you, Nelson. You're too kind.
no, this is a personal opinion, but I had to say this anyways. But like yeah, you said like you want to help like the new generations like figuring this out and not doing the same mistakes you did. How did you like, or did you felt that there was there was need for change to be done, and what was the drive, and how difficult was to implement the changes you perceive with your mind and putting like in like yeah in reality, because nowadays music business and music industry is pretty like it's politics as well. So
Yeah, sure.
so yeah, like how did you manage to build build your way up and make like a real impact in some of this yeah some of these sectors, and yeah, you actually have an influence here, you know, and that's really
I,
amazing.
I don't know what influence I have or don't have, but basically what it came down to at the end of the day is that as much as I felt like I was learning about the business back in the 90s, it wasn't really until Napster hit and digital hit and people started file sharing that I felt that there was a paradigm shift happening. And I think actually now with COVID, we're at another paradigm shift, which lends absolute truth to what Keith Harris said at Westway Lab a couple of years ago, that things go in cycles. And what happened during that paradigm shift with Napster coming and digital coming was that, to me, it seemed like a lot of the music industry's actions and rules were completely archaic and stuck in time, because I was all for file sharing. So I favored fans freely sharing music, because that's how, we used to share mixtapes in the 80s, and that's how we found out about new music. So to me, all of that stuff made sense, but to a lot of the major record industry at the time, they fought it tooth and nail until they lost, and Apple Music invented iTunes. So, I don't think, I think it's been sort of a parallel process with learning more about the business through necessity, as you said earlier, and through the paradigm shift that was the digital revolution. And that's when I really sort of started getting deeper into copyright law. And, probably these days, I'm still not a lawyer, but I can hold my own in a conversation with any copyright lawyer anywhere in the world, because just through experience and trial and error, I've had to learn that much about it. So it's sort of like, I just want to sort of make sure that I share that knowledge with everybody, so you don't have to go through the same, jumping the hoops and the same troubles that most people have to go through, because you don't really. A lot of this stuff isn't something that you learn in school. It's stuff that you learn by doing. It's stuff that you learn by touring. It's stuff that you learn by putting out records, and a lot of it is human relations, and artists can be also quite egocentric sometimes, which is why I really appreciate you as a person, because you're not that way, and it's just hard sometimes to keep things in context, in perspective.
Yeah, man, for sure. Another thing, like you mentioned, like you had interest for like the copyright side of it, and nowadays you own like Lusitanian, which is like a publishing company, and how that like how that like intuitive thing of like getting to know a little bit more about copyright and stuff like ultimately came out to be a company that actually tries to get syncs for artists and takes care of like
Yeah,
the publishing side of it, like and
I
what does it feel as well to like
yeah
accomplish that, you know?
yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, back in the 90s in Toronto, Fading Ways as a company was registered both as a label and a publisher. Except I knew nothing about publishing back then. We did a few syncs, we played some things in movies and stuff, but it was all really sort of just random. Whereas the business has developed and become so complex now that in order to even place a We Bless This Mess track in a German TV series, there's a bunch of registrations that have to be made in Germany beforehand, before we can even talk to Marcus Linde, the supervisor, in order for him to present the song to the client. So the
Yeah.
business has evolved so much that if you don't have that homework done, you will not get ahead. You will not get the syncs, unless occasionally when they happen still randomly. But those choices are, those moments are fewer and farther between. You have to sort of like create your own luck. Things aren't going to happen just by luck. And you know, that said, I still feel very much like my focus is primarily on the business side and running Lusitanian more than being an artist. But it's still nice to go into a studio every once in a while and make a record and put it out there and see what happens.
And not only that, like I've seen you perform in Örebro in Sweden, live at Heart.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing, like I really found, like, because I only met you like in the business side, and like
Was that
uh,
the hotel show,
yes,
or the church
no,
show?
no, the hotel one.
Okay.
Yes, like I've seen you there, and it was like, I don't know. I've just seen like a different person, and that person I saw is like, you can carry a lot of passion, and what you do in music, you do with love. And to have that, like, for me, it was like the moment I actually like understood, is like, no, like his place is also in the stage, like he's a musician, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why like I also wanted to do this like through Lusitanian Ghosts, to also promote like the more like creative side of you, and the,
Yeah.
the artistic side of you, not
Yeah.
you and all the other ghosts, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a team, and if you want to present them, you can do it right now. Who are the
Yeah,
other
I can.
ghosts?
Yeah, I can. I'd love, I'd love to talk about that a little bit. It's like I said, most of my time these days is spent on the business side of things and running Lusitanian here in Portugal. Oh, I've got Mickey Ghost here on the messenger giving me the thumbs up. But what happened was, my old guitar player friend from Sweden, Mickey Ghost, the last sort of Neil Leyton touring that we did all over Europe, um, except France. I don't think, Mickey Ghost is a great guitar player, and I invited him down. I think it was in 2015. We got this acoustic gig opening for Primitive Reason in Ericeira, and we just got together and played a bunch of the old songs. And that was around the time that I discovered Portugal had all these uh, ancient string instruments, violas regionais, the regional chordophones. And there's different ones with different tunings in different parts of the country. So you have the Campanissa in Alentejo, you have the Beiroa in Castelo Branco, which is where my dad is now, even though he's from Lisbon. Um, and they all have different string arrangements and tunings and stuff. And I asked Mickey, I said, what do you think if like oh no, sorry, no, I'm getting this wrong. That was later. So I bought the Viola Amarantina and took it
All
to
right.
Stockholm. I took it to Stockholm in like 2016, and we went out for a pizza, and I gave this Amarantina to Mickey. It was a 10-string uh, chordophone from Portugal, and he's like, "Ooh, Leyton, what is this? How do I play this?" And he took it home, and he put a video online playing "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Stones on the Amarantina. And that's when I thought, huh, right, okay. So what if we pick up these things and we play rock and roll music with it? What's going to happen if we do that? And that's how it started. So
All right.
we've made 2 records so far. The first one we did with Nelson Canoa and Ricardo Ferreira producing, and we asked this amazing painter to paint a real oil painting cover for the vinyl record, and
Well, yeah, I know
uh,
one. It's
you
pretty
know,
pretty neat.
and then at the beginning of this year, just before COVID hit, we went to Clouds Hill, which is an amazing studio in Hamburg, and recorded the second album on fat 2-inch tape, analog tape. So that's coming later this year, or at least a few singles will be coming later this year. Oh,
Amazing.
and we're debuting on our fledgling YouTube channel. We're putting out a lockdown video today at 6 o'clock. So right after this chat, you
Oh,
can head over
cool.
to the you can head over to the Lusitanian Ghosts YouTube channel and check out a new song called All the Sounds.
Amazing. Oh yeah. See, that was a really good idea to talk about this. I didn't know you had that at 6, so
Well,
let's all check that out.
I made it at 6 after you and I had planned this. So I said, oh, when should I, when should Lusitanian Ghosts unveil, so I figure I'd bring it here and tell you firsthand that
Perfect.
right after the chat
Amazing. Ah,
we can head over and see this thing. Yeah.
no, thank you, buddy. Thank you so much. And yeah,
And
because like
it's really really weird. This whole lockdown thing is really weird. Like I'm singing the thing and I'm holding the it's just really awkward. Though for me it's really awkward. Some of the other guys, Ugaju, Omiri, Abel Beja, Mickey, they look fucking great. But for me it was really awkward anyway.
nah, but it's all good. Like that's the thing. We're all like kind of like learning to reinvent ourselves during these times, and that's the thing. Like at least we're trying. We're trying to do stuff. We're putting like ourselves like in these conversations, or releasing music, or recording music, or writing music, or whatever we're doing, helping people out, like, and also the industry side and the business side. Wherever we're doing, I think this time we're actually just reinventing ourselves and trying to figure out like a better way to do things, which
Yeah,
is a positive
you
thing.
gotta do it. I mean, I've got a couple of kids of my own now, and I just think back to the past and parents and just trying to sort of generally improve the world and leave it a slightly better version of what it was when we go. That's kind of my approach to it.
Amazing. No, that's how I know you, man.
Not that I want to go anytime soon.
Yes, exactly. Knock on wood, man. um, another another question I had for you. Um, Obviously, I know this, but it's just like a question that is for the program. What do you currently do to make the music sector a better place? Like, what are your current projects, and how do you, yeah, what is like your attitude and this like yeah, in this sector, like what are your projects and what you're currently working in to improve our sector?
Yeah. So in 2012, me and another eight or nine people set up AME, which is the Independent Trade Association in Portugal. And then AME, in its own turn, in 2014, helped Rui Turrinha in Guimarães set up the Westway Lab, which is the first conference and music industry international meeting point in Portugal. And that's already been 7 years. Time flies. And then in 2016, Jorge Bizarro, Hugo Ferreira, and I set up the Y Portugal,
Exactly.
to be the export office for Portuguese music. Last year, AME also started with Ana Rita Feijão. We started the Digital Music Days conference at the CCB in Lisbon. And these are all things that I do.
The events in Casa da Música as well, like back in 2018, or
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
those workshops I remember as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, 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 and workshops also at Incubadora da Moraria and Palácio Baldaia in Benfica. All of that stuff is really, it's sort of me just trying to be as dynamic for the independent sector in Portugal. Actually, why Portugal is even for the major sector in Portugal, not just the independent sector. So it's really for the music sector in Portugal to develop itself, because if you have like 20 years of international music business experience and you come back to Portugal, you also want to give some of that back to your country, and it just comes naturally to me. I understand, some folks might look at it in a slightly suspicious way, like, oh, because I'm an outsider, right? So I come in from the outside and I say, hey, let's do this and this and this,
I
and
mean,
people are like,
the world is one place. You're never outside. You're never inside. It's like you
you're
are.
right, you're right, but some people don't see the world that way. So
Yeah, I know, man. But
Yeah.
like, regardless of that, I think everybody is gonna like everybody in the world has someone else that love their shit and someone else that like hates that shit. You know, like
Yeah, sure.
it's
Yeah,
it is what
it's
it is.
normal.
You know,
It is what
like
it is. What it is.
and I think like ultimately we just need to be authentic and unique
Yeah,
and follow our heart, our intuition, our passions, and that's pretty
that's it.
much what you've been doing like for like many years now, which is
That's it.
yeah, like that's unbelievable. You know, I
You
mean,
know, it's funny when you know there was a story. I think it must have been like 2010 or 2011. I was working at a record label here in Lisbon, and I said to my boss, I said, you know, I have to take a last minute vacation to go and play some shows in Spain. And she was like, what? What do you mean? And I said, yeah, you know, I've got an invitation from this Swedish friend of mine to go and because we did this song together. I sang on the record and wrote the lyrics to this song, and he's invited me to be a guest on these shows. And they're like, well, what shows? What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, you know, just small shows. Like we're opening for Kiss. And that you know it's just a weird juxtaposition of realities sometimes. We're like,
yeah,
but it's like you said, the world is getting smaller, so you should never be surprised that somebody you meet and you know they might appear to be an industry executive or whatever, but they actually might be an artistic person or the other way around. You never
yeah,
know, you know. So it's you just got to keep an open mind and heart and
yeah, man. No,
you know.
exactly. Like because I don't know if people know this, but like even even myself, like I play music, yeah, and people probably know like me from bands and stuff, but like I own my own record label and a PR company, booking agency. Like I do all this stuff as well, but probably I chose to be out in the roads and playing like and exposing myself more in the artistic side. Who knows? I mean, I still do my homework, you know, but
Yeah, of course.
I just choose to probably put a little bit extra attention on the because that's how I grew up. Like that's what my experience was, you know.
Yeah,
And that's like that's what I think is really cool. Like we came from like music wise, we came from like different realities and backgrounds, but it's cool that we even though we had like different backgrounds and journeys, we ended up like doing stuff like in a real like similar way, like expressing ourselves like in the creative side, and then creating something as well because it's creative on the industry side and the music sector. You know, that's really nice.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it is so different actually, because you know, of course, the definition of punk can change, or the sound of punk can change over time. But I really do see it as a sort of starting point for me because it was. I think when I sort of was listening to music from the Stones to Bowie to Velvet Underground to the New York Dolls, and then when you go from the Dolls, you know, to the Clash or to the Sex Pistols or whatever, you know, that's and even Hanoi Rocks, and then from Hanoi Rocks, which was this glam punk thing from Finland, you have like Guns N' Roses, which is, you know, whereas all the other commercial bands were bad metal with makeup, Guns N' Roses had like this street punk mixed with rock and roll and the Stones and Hanoi Rocks. So it's even though it sounds different over time, I think the sort of attitude is the same. Like when I first, you know, if Daniel is still on here, he'll remember this. He introduced me to Refused and The Shape of Punk to Come, and I was like, "What? This doesn't sound like punk, but it is punk, you know?
It
It's of
is.
course." So so or you know, Fugazi or whatever. But it's like it's just different punk at different times sounds a different way. But ultimately it comes down to this sort of DIY attitude and proactive behavior that we're talking about,
Yeah,
as
because
opposed to sort of like whatever other passive, you know, flavor of the month style copycats that you find in the industry. You know, like if you have a band and they tell you that their biggest influences are like stuff that's been in the charts over the last 6 months or a year, you know it's going to be crap. Like it's you need much deeper roots than that. You need deeper roots than that. You need to know where you come from, you know. So yeah.
No, but and that like extent, I also think like you were talking that like regardless of the time, punk is probably more about the attitude than the
Yeah.
music itself. I do really think that like Cash was a punk, you know,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
or like
Elvis was a punk, yeah.
yeah, like and in some way Mozart was a punk. I don't know
Yeah,
if
that's
you
what that's what
consider that,
Falco says anyway.
you know, but probably Jesus was a punk anyway as well. I'm kidding. But yeah, it's more about the attitude and like the way you rebel against like not rebel, but you kind of find an alternative way to the to what is normal or what is really normal, right? Like
You know, I find one thing that I really miss in music is sort of the message behind it. I think probably when I think back of on the music that was around last century to this century, of course there's artists such as yourself writing songs that mean something, but very often in the mainstream, songs are just entertainment. They're not really about something that has a message or that critiques what goes on in society and stuff. And I think that's also a very important element. I think music needs to be political to a certain extent, or not political necessarily in a political color sort of way, but like political in a societal sort of message way. You know,
I
try
mean,
try to.
everything is politics and how you behave and how you yeah. I get you. I get what you say.
It's like Dylan used to ask, "Oh, what's he got to say then? You know, what's he got to say then?" And it's like, well, yeah, we bless this mess, Nelson. You have a lot of things to say, a lot of good things to say. So it's like, let's listen to music in that way that enables us to have the time, which is really really tough these days because you're always on a short attention span sort of realm. Let's listen to music that demands the sort of time that it takes to really soak stuff in and really absorb the whole message of what it is that we're engaging with.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that uh, somehow like that was this thing in the 90s. I don't know, probably remember like 90s or 2000s or even like in these times that like being a junkie is really cool, you know, and like and all this like messages and subliminal messages like to destroy your like subconscious mind. Oh, that's cool and blah blah blah. I mean, for me, that's not cool anymore. That shit ain't cool
No,
because that thing will destroy. Like even if you have success, that thing will destroy your brain. That thing will destroy your ego. That thing will destroy your
you're
soul. You know.
you're
So
absolutely right. You're
I
absolutely
think
right.
yeah, that's like that's why like message is so fucking important and speaking your heart out, you know, in the most honest way. Don't follow the trend because some dumb stupid people are killing themselves slowly, you know.
Yeah,
Like I
or not so slowly. I mean, and it's damaging to people around you as well. And usually it's your loved ones that suffer. And it's not just heroin and other sorts of drugs. It's also alcohol.
oh yeah.
And you know, I've struggled with that over the years and had ups and downs. But ultimately, what it comes down to is like really listening to your peers. Like for example, Wayne Kramer from the MC5 wrote a great autobiography called The Hard Stuff, and it's a really good read because the MC5 were this band that were like at the top of their game with their first live album being their debut album, and then sort of just there was a downward spiral of drugs and as he says, funky behavior. And I remember I was writing for a fanzine in the mid '90s in Toronto, and Wayne Kramer came to town on a solo tour, and he had a song called "Junkie Romance," and it was a song that was critical of kids picking up guitars and wanting to look like Johnny Thunders and act like Keith Richards, and it's a great song if you look it up, "Junkie Romance." and because I was writing for this fanzine, I got to interview Wayne Kramer. And I said, I'm a singer and guitar player in a band. He goes, "Oh yeah, well, what do you play?" I said, "I play Gibson 135 through a Music Man amp." He's like, "Oh, cool." So and so he said to me, he said, "Don't ever play the guitar. Like anybody can play the guitar. Play the amp." And I was like, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean?" And he was talking about the feedback. He was talking about the electric guitar as an instrument that needs the feedback loop coming out of the amplifier, preferably a tube amplifier, to get that sweet feedback. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, so I get that. I'm playing a hollow body guitar, so we get a lot of feedback." But I never forgot that. And at the time, that junkie romance message got through, and I got to interview him, and he told me to play the amp. So that was a magic moment.
We usually, because we're talking for 40 minutes now, we usually finish like this conversation with something inspiring, something educative, and the way I turn this question is like, if you have imagine, oh, for you it's easy. Imagine your kids one day wanted to be a musician and be in the business, and what kind of what kind of conselhos? Oh man, I just
Advice. What kind
advice.
of
Yeah,
advice?
sorry. What kind of advice you would say to them, like to keep their mind sharp and like, because you have to love it, right?
Yeah, you absolutely have to love it. This is not a part-time game. This is not, and I say that and it feels like I'm doing it part-time, but I'm actually not, because my heart and my mind are always absolutely immersed in music. If I'm not handling the business side of it, I'm listening to it. Last year I was traveling around from conference to conference, listening to music on airplanes all the time, and that's why it's actually really tough handling the whole lockdown thing, because like you have less when you're at home with the family, you have less headspace where you can be alone and listen to music alone, which is something that I really love doing. The upside is that we're picking up instruments around the house and playing piano and bass with the kids and going like, "Oh, this is a C, this is," and learning the
Yes.
notes and sort of listening to records. My baby boy has now effectively busted the needle on the turntable, so I need to get a new needle for the vinyl turntable that belonged to my grandpa. So I don't know how, if I can still get an old needle like that somewhere. But it's the advice is like, you got to love it, and whatever it is you choose to do, you have to do it fully. You cannot do it um, in a sort of half-hearted way. That will not get you anywhere. You need to like fully immerse yourself in it without the funky business, without the funky
Yeah.
business.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's really good advice, man. Because I do believe that sometimes, man, I kind of like related a little bit to skateboard, because it's all about commitment. You only land a trick if you commit yourself to land it. You might fall, you have to overcome fear, but you need to commit and land it, and then when you land it is a good sensation. You know, uh,
Yeah.
so
I,
basic.
I, for me, it's a good sensation when I even can stand up on the longboard without falling off. So,
But like I usually compare to like that, those teachings I then apply to music or to tattoos, or because like it's a really good way of like perceiving life or a skill or an achievement. Commit to it, you know
yeah,
commit to it.
absolutely. Uh,
Commit to it with no fear, but understanding that are gonna be challenges, right?
yeah. Well, nothing is easy, man. Music isn't easy. The music business isn't easy. Raising a family isn't easy. It's all about responsibility and commitment. Real commitment. Uh, don't screw things up.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Now that's also a good advice, man. Now, yeah, that's the thing. Don't screw things up, because yeah. First, there's you and yourself and people around you and people that you affect. Like, we're really important beings. Like, everybody in the face of this earth is really important, you know, and
It's
essential and unique.
it's
Um,
really easy to tear shit down and destroy stuff. It's really hard to build good things and build things for the community, and that's just what you got to do. If at the end of the day you're living that more or less every day, then the world will be slightly better. Like I said earlier, when you leave. So that's what it's about to me. And also going back to the music thing, I think another piece of advice is that everything that you create these days is worth something, even if you don't realize it. Even if you don't realize that a demo recording that you made when you were a kid, it might seem like it's not worth anything, but actually it is. Every piece of content that you make, you know, register it as your thing, and then share it with the world, because you might not think much of it, but somebody else might absolutely love it.
yeah.
And if don't keep stuff in the closet, you know.
Boom. Amazing.
Whether they're happy monsters or not, let's all just get out of the closet, you know.
Oh man, because I have, yeah, you hit like a really good point, man. I have so many unreleased songs and stuff I do. Like, I get you, and yeah, we should just be able to put things out instead of like actually
We
have. Yeah, I get you, man. I get you.
I started a new label. I started a new label called Shame Destroyer, and Shame Destroyer. It's Dan who saw you play live at the top of that roof last summer. What was that? The
Um,
Rock in Rio thing.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You remember the Canadian guy that was with me, right?
Exactly.
So
He played with
he
you in Passion Flower as well,
yeah,
right?
So
Cool.
he came up with his name for the label that's reissuing the Passion Flower stuff, called Shame Destroyer, and it's not just for reissues; it's for new music as well. But the reissue thing is a strong component of it. It's like, okay, if you've got this in your drawer, just release it, get it out there. You know, like, don't keep stuff locked up.
I might send you some tracks then.
Awesome. I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
No, no. This conversation, I think we covered a lot of ground in this conversation. I hope you had a good time as well talking
Absolutely.
about all these different things. It's just, yeah, for me, it's inspiring to actually have this kind of conversations. It's not only everybody that is listening, or they might listen like later on IGTV or YouTube, you know, but like for me also, this is quite like, yeah, I'm learning every day with different people coming here and speaking their hearts out and their minds out. It's really, yeah, it's incredible, man. And
Well,
especially, yeah.
thank you for doing this, and for inviting me, and also for inviting all the other great people like Robert and everybody else that you've been chatting with. I mean, it's if I can, I would like to invite everybody in about 10 minutes to go over to the Lusitanian Ghosts YouTube for this premiere of all of the sounds. Um,
Obviously, you can, brother, because this platform is yours also. So you just plug what you need to plug, man.
and it's not a very punk rock number, but we wrote it in the studio, and this is all home recorded during the hardest time here in Portugal, where everybody was really stuck at home. And
All right.
so, you know, that's what it was. That's what it was about. We wanted to sort of just share these videos. It was, you know, João Souza, Johnny
Yeah, yeah,
Dynamite.
yeah.
It was his idea. And actually, one of the best bands that I saw when I came back to Portugal was Murdering Tripping Blues, and you know, getting to know all these great folks like Daniel Makosh and Nuno Calado. You
Yeah.
know, it's all in the family, I guess.
Yes, man. Dude, awesome. So yeah, everybody who's watching, and people that are like gonna watch later, then go to Lusitanian Ghost YouTube channel, right? And yeah, see them.
I'll be the guy. I'll be the guy hiding behind the hat.
All right, cool.
All
No,
right,
no.
Nelson.
Neil,
Take
sorry.
care.
You have so
Ah,
many
whatever,
names,
man.
man. Thank you so much once again. It was a real pleasure having you here. And
Thank you.
yeah, like if you have any other kind of conversation and talk you want to have, feel free to just message me. We can come back here, do another episode, something you feel is relevant to speak about. Like, again, this platform is also yours. And yeah, it's just really great to have you here, man.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for all your energy and the good stuff that you do.
Nah, dude, thank you so much. You're really welcome, and thank you, brother.
Take care.
Bye bye.
All right. Ciao.
Yo, yo, yo. Thanks everyone for watching this. This was episode 33. And I think, yeah, this is the last episode of the week. Next week we have another, yeah, 4 episodes. And in the other week, probably more 4 episodes. By the way, the like we can tattoo again in the UK, so I might start working in the tattoo shop like at some point. Um, I don't know like how frequently I can still do this, but I'll try to do this anyways. Probably in a different time of the day. Probably like less times a week, but I'll keep doing this. And who knows? Probably I'll just reinvent the whole thing. And yeah, who knows? Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye. See you next week.